Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In the next 5 minutes, I'd like you to think about coming to our session, and that would be on landslide risks. It's one of the most underestimated types of risk, and also risk assessment for landslides is really problematic. Landslides continue to threaten a lot of people, also here in Africa, but all over the world. Recent example here from Uganda, only 2 weeks ago, major landslides killed a lot of people. If you look at the statistics, it's actually quite an underestimated type of hazard. Coming from EM data, the red line shows the casualties to landslides, but the light green line shows if you add up the related ones to earthquakes and hurricanes. So we need to link these two components. We need to look at the risk analysis part, and we need to look at the decision-making part, and how do we get information from one to the other. In the risk analysis part, we're dealing with problems. One of them is the lack of availability of historical data. Comparison to other types of hazards, this might be a really major problem for landslides. They are difficult to collect, and they are also related to triggers. So we're trying to collect inventories that relate to an earthquake or a tropical a rainfall event, and through that get information on the temporal probability of their occurrences. We're using also new methodologies for that. We could use remote sensing for automatic collection of landslide information. We're using radar interferometry. But we can also use crowdsourcing information, making use of a lot of different people. Landslides are also chain effects. So they are caused very often by other types of hazards, and by themselves, they might again cause other hazards. And this is an example of that. The city of Bechuan, hit by the earthquake, and a lot of landslides killing people, flooding caused by landslides, and at the end, debris flows destroying what was remaining. So, another example of this multi-hazard, a big landslide blocking a river after an earthquake, but the main threat is downstream, where a city of 2 million people had to be evacuated. One of the main difficulties we have is landslides are not just endangering where they occur, but where they run out. And the modeling of that is fairly complicated. We need to look at 3 different components. We need to have information on temporal probability, spatial probability, and size probability in order to link them and convert a susceptibility map into a real hazard map. Then we have the problem of physical vulnerability. How do we model landslide vulnerability? What is actually landslide intensity? How do we represent that? For earthquakes or for flooding, it's much easier. If we cannot quantify these components, we can't get into a quantitative risk assessment. So very often we rely on qualitative risk assessments, but that wouldn't give us actually the amount of losses. And that's required to go into the left side of it, the decision-making part. We have the risk evaluation, risk reduction measures, and very important, the cost-benefit analysis related to the stakeholders and their objectives. Some of these risk reduction measures work, and some are much more difficult. Early warning works, but very often only at the local level and very specifically. Land use planning is the best tool, but it's not always effective. International initiatives have been developed, like a huge EU project that developed a lot of tools for doing that, as well as the international program on landslides. There's also program changes that looks at how landslides risk changes over time. As you would have climate change, land use change, and population change, they would affect the risk, and you need also tools to do that in a cyclic manner in order to improve risk reduction. So we have the 3 key speakers that will touch upon these different aspects, looking at how landslides in Africa, to land use planning, and how we do this at community level. We invite you all to come to our session, which would be on Wednesday morning, 9 to 10. And we will also display you some of the training opportunities in landslide risk assessment that are internationally available. Thank you very much.